Welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. Are you ready for a couple more sessions? Yay. All right, fantastic. I'm going to be bringing Celeste Stewart up, and I just want to give you an interesting fact about Celeste. You may have already read this in the program, but Celeste is also the managing editor of ScarSource, a publication which aims to make ataxia research news more accessible for patients and family members. Essentially, all of that really challenging, difficult to read information, she simplifies and makes it so that we can understand what is really being talked about. So if you go to the National Ataxia Foundation's website and you look up ScarSource, you'll be able to see some of those articles that she's made simple, and hopefully that will help in some of the things that you're looking to find out. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up Celeste.
Well, thanks for the shout out, Dana, and just a shout out in return. Those ScarSource articles are written by over 70 volunteers, many of whom are graduate students in ataxia research labs around the world. So they do the heavy lifting and the hard work, and then I get to help out with the editing. So some of you may be wondering, wait a second, in the program it says Dr. Lauren Moore is going to be giving a research update, and I am clearly not her. I promise this is research related, and I'll only take 15 minutes of your time, so I'm the warm-up act for Lauren. But I'm going to be sharing with you some information about our recent community survey, which first, let me advance this. Oh, come on. This is user error. My apologies, folks. There we go. So disclaimers, like all the other talks that have been here, and presenter disclosures, plot twist, I work for the National Ataxia Foundation, so major disclosure there. But you may be wondering, what is the NAF Community Survey? So this was a survey we conducted in January. It was in English. It was open to all NAF members ages 18, over 18, who were either diagnosed with ataxia or family members who are also over 18. We did feedback collection from January 6th to January 20th of this year. So I hope many of you took part, and you might be like, oh yeah, I think I've received either an email about that or saw it on a social media post. For those 2 weeks, you're kind of inundating inboxes with information about this survey. So you may be wondering, why did we conduct a survey? There are 4 main reasons. First, we wanted to get to know our members. It's been a while since we checked in. Our membership has grown significantly in the past 5 years, so we wanted to learn a little bit more about you. We wanted to also gather feedback on our programs and services so that we can better serve you. We wanted to do some access pattern analysis, which is a fancy way of seeing how do you access our resources? What barriers are there to access? So we can, well, break those barriers down. And last, but certainly not least, we wanted to learn more about the experiences of people with ataxia. If we're going to be surveying you and asking you other questions, we might as well be asking about your ataxia experience. So I have the privilege of sharing some initial findings. We got a lot of feedback. It's going to take quite a bit of time to go through all those survey results. So we're still doing the analysis. We're going to be sharing the full results later this year, but I want to give you a sneak peek for the folks who are at AAC. So first off, who answered this survey? So any country you see in blue here, we had respondents from this country. In total, we had 680 NAF members worldwide complete the survey. That's 587 people with ataxia and 93 caregivers, giving us a nice even number. 81% were from the United States, so the overwhelming majority, and 63% of survey respondents were women. In terms of who answered the survey, we also asked about people's ages, which are displayed in this graph there, depending on which side you're looking at. The majority of respondents were between the ages of 55 and 74, with a mean or average age of 61 of people who are completing this survey, which is reflective of the other data we had about our membership. And then we also measured this fancy thing called urbanicity, which in simple terms is whether you live in an urban center, if you live in a suburban area, or if you live in a more rural area. And we found about half of respondents lived in a suburban area, and then we had a fairly even split between urban and rural folks. So a little bit more about who answered this survey. The big question I get all the time with any kind of survey data we do is what types of ataxia are represented? Who's responding? So I have a lovely pie graph to show you here. So 74% of respondents to the survey had a genetic form of ataxia. So you can see here in dark blue, we have 6% of respondents had acquired forms of ataxia, 11% had sporadic or ataxia of unknown origin. We had 75% have a dominant form of ataxia or genetic ataxia, such as SCA. We had 17% with a recessive form of ataxia like FA or RSAX. And then we had 10% of respondents that either themselves or their loved ones, they know they had a type of ataxia, but they couldn't remember what exactly the classification was. Then we also, thank you for advancing, 45% of respondents let us know that they had to wait over 5 years to receive an ataxia diagnosis, which has been reflected in some of the other stories shared at this AAC. And then 51% of respondents reported that the first symptom that they recognized, or like, oh, I should probably get some help for this, was impaired balance. We also asked about where people find information about ataxia. And unsurprising, because we're surveying members of the National Ataxia Foundation, 80% said they were using NAF as a source of ataxia information, followed by HCPs, that's an acronym for healthcare practitioners, such as doctors, nurses, OTs, PTs, and also support groups, so that peer-to-peer component. But people are finding information about ataxia from a variety of different sources. So 58% of survey respondents said they were accessing NAF services. So this is either support groups, webinars, our articles we have on our website, past video recordings, things like that. 58% said that they were accessing NAF services at least monthly. You can see the breakdown here. We have about 7% saying they access them daily, 22% saying weekly, 29% saying monthly, and then we have 27% every few months, and then fewer people saying annually or less frequently or never. And then it was good for us to see this. It lifted our spirits. 84% of survey respondents said they had an overall positive opinion of the National Ataxia Foundation. So this was a very quick overview and a very limited amount of data. If you took part of the survey, you're like, Celeste, where are the other huge amounts of questions that we asked about specific NAF services? I'll ask you for a little bit of patience. We're still analyzing that data. But in terms of next steps, we are going to be analyzing the data for specific feedback on NAF services. So things like Ask the Expert webinars or the Welcome Rolls and your opinions on that. We're also going to be analyzing the data, looking at barriers to accessing NAF services and participating in our programs. And we also asked a series of questions around healthcare experiences of NAF members, and we're excited to dive into that data as well. So once we have completed that data analysis, we're going to discuss internally how we can best incorporate your feedback into what we do, as at the end of the day, we are here to serve you all. We want to be doing a good job of that. And we're going to be sharing these findings publicly once the analysis is completed. I hope that's sometime in the summer, depending on how long things take. It might be sometime in the fall. But please stay tuned. I'm very excited about this project and to share these results with you. But thanks for listening. If you do have any questions, please come chat with me when I'm out and about, or send me an email at ataxia.org. But with that, I kind of crashed Lauren's talk. I'm taking up some of her time here. So I will pass the floor back over to her and introduce Dr. Lauren Moore, who is the Chief Scientific Officer of the National Ataxia Foundation. If we could give her a warm welcome.
I'm always happy to give Celeste a little bit of my time. So thank you, Celeste, for that introduction and that overview of the survey. Really, there was many purposes for running that survey, but one of the main reasons was to help keep us accountable to you members, you patients, you caregivers, all of you in our community. NAF is almost entirely funded through donor funding from individuals like yourselves, and so it is our responsibility to show and demonstrate to you all how we are effectively using your funding to support ataxia research and the development of treatments. And so with that, there we are. Go past the disclosures. And so I want to start today by talking a little bit about how we have utilized funding to help support and drive ataxia research. And I do want to say before I get started that none of this could happen without my really wonderful research team. You've probably seen a couple of them out at the research table, and a couple of them have been stuck back in the ACT room with me, working on developing the next generation of ataxia researchers. But I do want to acknowledge them and the wonderful work that they do. So today I'm just going to focus on really the last 10 years of NAF grant funding. But I first want to note that I had to actually ask a couple different members or a couple different employees at NAF to try to understand when NAF gave our first research grant. And I do love round numbers. Unfortunately, it was 49 years ago, so we're almost at 50 years of NAF grant funding. I really think that's outstanding. And really, 50 years ago, it really would have been ataxias without a name. It would have been these unknown forms, many, many different etiologies. And so we're grateful that we were able to give funding kind of in that early stage. So I looked just back the last 10 years, and we have an annual grant program where researchers around the world apply to the NAF for small to large projects to support the research throughout the year. And so I found that over the last 10 years, we have provided more than $9 million to support ataxia research. And we have successfully spread that $9 million across more than 200 research projects, and these span over 60 ataxia types. I know that And I know that text there is very small. I wasn't really including it so that you can see every single one of those 60 diseases, but I did want to point them out just to show how well we really have spread that funding across the many, many different types of ataxia. The labs that we fund that are doing these research projects are located all over the world. You'll note that many of them are in the United States, but we also have funded research across Europe and Australia as well. If you take that long list of diseases that I showed on the previous slide and break it down, we've spent about 2/3 of our funding on dominant ataxias. A lot of this is driven by the fact that we do receive large restricted funds, particularly for a couple of those most common dominant ataxia types. And so when donations come in and the donor wants them to go to a specific disease type, we are restricted to spend it on those specific diseases. But then our second largest group is general and sporadic forms of ataxia. So this is research that either is going to help many different types of ataxia or is really focused on either identifying genetic mutations or on measuring or understanding ataxia overall. So I want to highlight just a couple of things that have been accomplished through NAF grant funding. And so for the next slide, I'm actually only looking back on 2 to 3 years of grant funding. We have a new reporting system for how individuals report what has come out of their project. So I just picked a couple from the last few years. And so in terms of research, one of many things that comes out of this is new model systems. We know, especially as these new diseases are discovered, having creation of model systems, we're talking cell lines, fly lines, mouse lines, all kinds of different model systems, is absolutely essential to study the disease. And once those models are created in one lab, they can be shared across multiple laboratories, they can foster collaboration, they can really act as a seed for study in these newly discovered diseases. So those are just a couple of the cell lines that have been created in the last few years as a result of NAF funding. We also fund projects that are aimed at improving clinical care, improving the way that we assess ataxias, and potentially improving future clinical trials. We also have funded the creation of an ataxia genetic database. This is a big collection of ataxia genomes that have helped identify new forms of ataxia, and it continues to grow. And we've also funded the creation of prediction models and assays for drug identification. When I think about NAF funding, what I really think about are the people that we're funding. Because yes, we are supporting research, yes, we are advancing the field, but it's really the people that are doing the work, and it's our little push, perhaps early in their careers, that can help keep them in the ataxia field, help them continue to advance in their field. So I just wanted to highlight a couple researchers and some of the feedback that we've heard from them. So here's one individual, Alexa Puka, who had received a graduate research grant as a PhD student. And she said that this investment in my research paved the way for $145,000 in support from the NINDS in the form of a training grant for predoctoral researchers. And she says, NAF's funding played a crucial role in pushing my research forward and emphasizing the importance of ataxia research to the NIH. And I just wanted to note, yes, we're funding an early career individual, but she has been incredibly productive in her graduate career and has co-authored or authored 6 research publications, really focusing on understanding SCA1, SCA3, as well as identifying potential new drug targets. Here's a quote from another individual that we funded. The research that we funded was on the left, but he chose to highlight a grad student that he was able to sponsor in his lab to work with him through an NIH grant. And he says, supporting the training of the next generation of neuroscientists that may go on to a career studying the cerebellum and ataxia may be the most significant achievement of your funding. And then I'll just highlight one more quote. So this is from Dr. Roderick Moss, who we provided a SCA3 Pioneer grant that was focused on transcranial magnetic stimulation and other forms of stimulation as potential treatments for SCA3. And he said that as a result of our funding, he initiated an international collaboration with groups in Germany, Brazil, and Italy focusing on this topic. And one of the aims of that collaboration was to identify gaps in our current knowledge and avenues for future research. And they're now currently discussing possibilities for a shared project. So when in comparison to federal funding that researchers receive, such as from the NIH, NAF funding is really a drop in the bucket compared to the immense federal funding that has gone into support ataxia research. But it's really this early push, this planting a seed, this creating a community that can continue to come back and work with each other and receive that early support that I think has a bigger impact in the long run. Another purpose of ataxia, of NAF grant funding, I keep using the word seed, and one of the things that these grants do is they allow researchers to do early and potentially risky research projects that will then allow them to apply for a much larger federal funding grant. And so here's one fantastic researcher, Dr. Hannah Schrock. At the time, she was awarded a postdoc fellowship in 2020. That was a $35,000 fellowship, and she cites this NAF grant as helping her move on to her next stage and gathering the data she needed to successfully apply for and get an NIH grant for $2.9 million. And that individual has gone on to an assistant professorship and now has her own lab where she's continuing to identify new potential therapies and continue to mentor the next generation of ataxia researchers. So these are just 4 of the stories of the more than 200 research projects, but you can see how this little bit of funding can go a long way to move these individuals onto the next stage and advance our understanding of ataxia. So I'm going to go beyond our grants and talk about some of the other large research initiatives or programs that we fund. And one of those is the International Congress for Ataxia Research. We have been funding at NAF ataxia research meetings for decades, but this is we have, in the last couple of years, joined together with FARA and Ataxia UK and Ataxia Global Initiative to sponsor a joint meeting called the International Congress for Ataxia Research. The last meeting took place in London as it was largely hosted by Ataxia UK. And each time I come here, I think I say this, that this was the largest ataxia research meeting that there's ever been. We have, I think, about 450 individuals in this room. Add another 150, and each of those comes from a different lab that is completely focused on ataxia research. And so we're really talking about an amazing number of researchers that are today focusing on ataxia in their labs. And they come from 32 countries. We've had many, many talks today, but at this meeting, there were 80 talks completely focused on ataxia, which I really think shows the breadth of knowledge that continues to be created in this field. And I just would comment that we did survey attendees, and they said that 88% said that they found it extremely useful or very useful, and that they're very likely that the new context that they made at the conference will enhance their work. So again, we're fostering this community and allowing people to collaborate and learn from one another. And then one of the other biggest programs that we currently sponsor is the CRCSCA. This is our natural history study where individuals with a number of different SCAs come into one of 16 sites around the country every year for a number of clinical assessments, in some cases donating CSF, and now in some cases undergoing MRI imaging. And this data is collected and stored. And you may ask, why does the CRCSCA matter? Why have we been doing this for over a decade? And in some cases, this has provided a really critical infrastructure to validate and improve our clinical trial design by testing new assessments, by testing new biomarkers, and learning better ways to understand the progression of ataxia that will help inform future clinical trial design. And then a term that I'm going to come back to later in this talk is that now these data sets, especially in rare disease, are acting as what they're calling real-world evidence. And this is actually functioning as a comparator or a control group in the submission of NDAs in clinical trial design. So I'll come back to that in a little bit. Okay, so this is going beyond NAF and onto the larger ataxia field. And I know that this was touched on in the previous genetic talk, so I'll just touch on it really briefly. But there have been a number of newly identified ataxia genes discovered in recent years. And I'm sure you might be sick of hearing about SCA27B at this point, but one of those that I do want to feature is SCA27B, as well as Canvas RFC1 ataxia. These two diseases together are going to greatly reduce the number of unknown patients once testing has become really widely available. In just 2 years since SCA27B was discovered, over 700 individuals have been diagnosed. So these were 700 individuals who likely had an unknown diagnosis prior to the discovery of this gene. And it's really amazing how quickly we can go from a discovery of a gene in 2022 to a test in 2023, and now to over 700 patients getting a diagnosis. I think we also touched on the NAF's Genetic Counseling and Testing Initiative, but I did want to share some of the numbers. If you can't tell, I'm kind of a numbers person. And so this is how many genetic tests that we've been able to complete and report, and the results reported out to these individuals who are at risk for SCA1, 2, and 3. And as noted, it was previously paused, but now this program has reopened and we're accepting new participants. And this is restricted to individuals who are 18 and over, who live in the United States and are at risk for SCA1, 2, or 3 because they have a family member who has received a diagnosis in one of those diseases. One other program I did want to mention, NAF received really specified restricted external funding to provide no-cost genetic counseling and testing for individuals suspected of having SCA27B and RFC1 ataxia. So in addition to the funding that we provided for the SCA1, 2, and 3 at risk, we have also provided genetic tests specifically for individuals at risk for SCA27B, RFC1 ataxia, or who are suspected of having those disorders. And unfortunately, at this time, that's limited to a specific number of sites in the US. Okay, so now let's get to drug development. And so I'm just gonna leave this slide up here for a minute. This is, at this time, every single one of the companies on this site has a publicly disclosed therapeutic program where they are working on development of a treatment for ataxia or an ataxia-related disorder. This is huge. This is a huge number of companies specifically working on ataxia, specifically investing in ataxia. And what I can tell you is that these are only the publicly disclosed sites. There are many different companies who also are working in the background on development programs on ataxia, but have not publicly disclosed. And so I want to mention that a couple of these are here today. A couple of them are sponsors, thank you. And a number of them have worked specifically with NAF through our Drug Development Collaborative. And we continue to form new relationships with these companies because at the end of the day, we need to work together to get these drugs across the finish line. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of the therapeutic programs and where we are today. Biogen's Skyclarys, we all know, was the first drug to receive FDA approval for any ataxia type. Specifically, it was approved for the treatment of Friedreich's ataxia for individuals that are 16 and over. Since its approval in 2023, it also has been approved by the European Commission in 2024, as well as Health Canada in 2025. So it continues to become accessible to individuals with FA around the world. And there's also an open label phase 1 study that is evaluating individuals between the ages of 2 and 16 to try to expand access of Skyclarys to adolescents and children with FA as well. I also just wanted to note that there are public information demonstrating that there are preclinical studies that are assessing Skyclarys for other ataxia types, including RSACs. So there is some hope and potential for this drug to expand beyond FA. Earlier this year, there's something that's never happened in ataxia research, which is that there were 2 different NDA applications submitted to the FDA for different ataxia types. So what I mean by that is there are 2 different drugs that made it all the way through phase 1, 2, 3 clinical trials, all the way to the point that they were ready to submit to the FDA. And both of those have been filed at the FDA and are under review. And I just think that's an amazing accomplishment. The first drug approved in 2023, and now we have 2 new drugs that may actually be approved in 2025 as well. But I did want to mention the first one is troriluzole. This was the first NDA ever under review for a spinocerebellar ataxia. And NAF and our CRCSCA actually did play a significant role in this application in the fact that we allowed the CRCSCA patient data to be included in this NDA application where the de-identified patient data is used as a comparator or almost you can think of it almost like a placebo group. These trials are really hard to run in rare disease, and having this extra data set to help compare the efficacy of the treated group to a non-treated group really helps support and have the kind of statistical analysis that you need to do to see if these drugs are actually working in these rare disease populations. PTC's therapeutic for FA also used this real-world evidence from FA-specific clinical trials as well. So these natural history studies that patients have been participating in for years and years have spent their time and energy and have gone through, in some cases, invasive procedures like CSF withdrawals. It's because of them that some of these drugs might be able to reach the finish line and reach actual FDA approval. So I just kind of wanted to give a hand to anyone who has participated in a research study. And we should be able to hear results of whether either or both of these drugs are approved around Q3 of this year, although these timelines can rapidly change. Okay, and then I wanted to comment on a trial you might be aware of from Vico Therapeutics. This is an antisense oligonucleotide therapeutic, which means it's a therapeutic that's aimed at reducing production of the mutant protein. This trial targets the CAG repeat that causes a number of these polyglutamine ataxias. And the trial right now includes SCA1, SCA3, and Huntington's disease. Many of these ASO trials are started in Europe, Some of the regulations in the US make some of the dosing studies that are required for ASO's phase 1 studies a little bit difficult, so they often start in Europe and then expand into the US and other places in the world after the phase 1 has been completed. The latest word is that these dose studies are ongoing, and they are still actively recruiting individuals with SCA1 and SCA3, but only at sites in Europe and some in Asia. You can visit clinicaltrials.gov to learn more about this study and the requirements to participate in it. Excitingly, there's another second ASO gene silencing therapeutic that has already launched this year from Arrowhead Pharmaceuticals. This is specifically for individuals with SCA2, and it is also using a gene silencing approach to knock down levels of the causative protein. They are actively recruiting individuals with SCA2. Right now, there are only sites in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And I have heard that U.S. residents may be eligible to participate in this study at international sites, but you'll need to talk to the study contact to see if you're eligible. So a little bit more SCA27B. As I said, the gene was discovered in 2022. The test became available in 2023, and now there are more than 700 patients diagnosed. And just yesterday, actually, Slaxa Therapeutics announced plans to conduct a clinical trial evaluating SLX100 for SCA27B. They had previously received IND acceptance earlier this year, and there was also news that this trial will be funded in part by a $7.3 million grant that was awarded to Dr. Perlman through the CDMRP program. The CDMRP program, again, has funded more than $35 million for ataxia research over the last couple of years, and was only made available because of advocacy from individuals like yourselves. So. Okay, I did want to touch on stem cell therapies for ataxia because I know that this is a hot topic. I want to be clear that currently there are no FDA-approved stem cell therapies for ataxia. There have been some progress in regulated clinical trials assessing stem cells in different forms of SCA. I'll point out two companies that have partnered, StemInit and Reprocell. They work with a specific product called StemChimal. And this StemChimal has been taken into 2 phase 2 clinical trials that took place in Taiwan and Japan. Importantly, these were randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled clinical trials. And that analysis of the phase 2 clinical trial in those 2 Asian countries is ongoing. And I have heard that they are, depending on the results, it may lead to them pursuing conditional approval in Japan and Taiwan, which is a unique type of approval that is specific to those regions. There has been an open phase 2 IND approved in the US. However, this could enable a US phase 2 clinical trial to occur in the US. However, there's no timeline or reports for when that might occur, but it's still a possibility. I wanted to highlight that there is, of course, more progress occurring in FA. There's several new therapeutics that have been announced, but I think some of the most exciting things coming out of these additional trials are that there's new therapies that are targeting the cardiomyopathy that is really a massive problem to these patients, and that they're also allowing clinical trials to include pediatric patients. So these are 2 big improvements in the FA field. So finally, I want to leave you with just a couple take-home messages. I know I've said a lot of numbers, I've covered a lot of ground, so I'm just going to try to get this down to 3 slides. So first, I showed you that slide that had all of the pharma companies that are currently working on ataxia. This recent boom in pharma investment would not have been possible without the decades of dedication that has the decades of dedication by Ataxia researchers, as well as the funding that has gone in to support these researchers to get to where we are today. I mentioned, NAF funding obviously has played a role for about 50 years, but most of this funding is coming from other sources, from federal funding sources. And many of these researchers are facing a couple difficult years because there have been significant cuts to federal funding. That CDMRP program has been reduced by 60%. So that's that single entity that was able to bring $35 million into ataxia research. The pot of money available next year will be reduced by 60%. The NIH money that has been designated to support brain research has been reduced by 20%. And so we continue to advocate for ataxia research funding, for funding to support these rare diseases. If you're interested in continuing to help in our advocacy work, I encourage you to sign up for the advocacy newsletter and to work with us to continue to advocate for ataxia research, because these treatments are not possible without funding of basic and early translational research. We have had decades worth of progress in genetics, in biology, in technology, in informatics, and drug design. And what's really wonderful now is that we are able to use those advancements across hundreds of ataxia disorders. We are capable of creating model systems that it used to take 5-6 years to create a mouse model. Today, it takes about a year to create a mouse model. And so we're able to focus in a rapid time on these new and rare ataxia types. And you'll find that just about every one of these ataxia disorders, there's some lab out there that's specializing in studying them and understanding them. And so there really is not a disease too rare when it comes to ataxia research. And then finally, I wanted to acknowledge the fact that we're going to, yes, have great successes. I've pointed to a couple of them today, but we're also going to continue to have setbacks. Drugs will go into trial, they will fail. Some of them will succeed, some of them will be paused, some of them won't be made available immediately to all groups. But I really want to point to the fact that this momentum is undeniable. I know me and my team's lives are getting exceptionally busy as we continue to work with both researchers and drug companies, and that momentum is really on the side of the patients. We're going to have ups and downs, but we are continuing to move forward, and the excitement is palpable when we bring these researchers and investigators and companies together to work on drug development. And so with that, I will go ahead and close. Thank you. I don't think we have time for questions, so I'll be right back.